Hello and welcome to the Thom and Joe show. I'm Joe.
I'm Tom.
Did I catch you at a bad time?
No, you did not, Joe. We have arrived. God, it's nearly April, Joe. It's time to talk about. It's a music episode. It's our first music episode. Well, our second.
It's a numbered music episode. It's not just the anniversaries.
No, absolutely. Nope.
For this one, I rolled out one of my favorites. And it's a recent favorite. I'm an old man. I'm 40. I don't have a lot of new music that I listen to and hey, I need this. When something comes out that I do, I treasure it. And not surprisingly, it scratches the nostalgia itch. I am talking about the Midnight's first LP, Endless Summer.
Indeed,
Yep.
We're off to We're off to talk about a new genre stop on our never-ending quest across music, which is synthwave.
Synthwave, or music that came out after Drive came out. That's 80s music, not from the 80s.
Yeah. It's a big genre. It's a genre that goes under many names. You may also know it as Outrun, which obviously takes particularly from obviously that name comes from the 1986 video game arcade game Outrun, which many people listening to this episode hopefully have played. You know, that very, very cool, very super 90s thing. You know, that red Testarossa, man. I mean, this is peak 80s, peak capital.
Yeah, it's like driven city pop or something like that. But this is more synthwave. This is future synth, electronic chill wave.
This is big synthesizer lines, gated drums. Those sort of net polygon net sort of things, and very big, very, very Miami sort of style.
The hacking too much time aesthetic.
Yes, the not the 90s sort of, because I spoke about, oh god, this is going back some years. So I did in a previous life an episode on a game called Broken Reality with our good friend Mr. J Darkside, where that is sort of, we want to emphasize this is not the sort of same stuff as Vaporwave. Vaporwave is very much a reconstitution of things like Muzak and sort of corporate sound. This is more akin to, I guess this is more akin to what would have been on the radios in the 80s rather than the way that the 80s itself was,
Well, okay, I was there, I can talk about it, but I don't think this is the way the way it sounded. It's like how we remember it sounding and how we remember it feeling, and nostalgia is a big part of the Midnight.
An integral part definitely of synth. I mean, synthwave is
this was more what soundtracks were doing. This would be like Miami Vice or
Vangelis. Or Blade Runner, it's so. How do we have to? I guess go back to the heady days of 2002, and we have to go back to a little game called Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Yes,
which is sort of where people sort of started looking at the 80s and going, hang on a minute, this is actually really cool.
There's an aesthetic here, and if we could just hammer it out from things like Reaganism and some other things, we might have a genre here.
Yeah, I guess the best way of describing synthwave is sort of 80s aesthetic, 80s production, but it sort of doesn't really, it sort of sounds at once like the 80s and sort of like a halcyon idea of what the 80s could have been without, Reaganism and etc. And it tends to be a sonic sort of a sonic sort of thing. There are occasional sort of things which we'll come on to in a moment, which sort of I guess take that into a visual aspect.
Yeah. Visual would mostly be inspired by Tron.
Yeah. Big, but that is sort of the best way I could describe the visual. And indeed, to be honest, the sonic sort of thing is something like Tron, like the original Tron. That sort of, yes, absolutely, Wendy Carlos's score for Tron, which makes it 2 in 2 episodes we've mentioned Wendy Carlos, which is getting on for a record. Yeah, it's sort of like, the visual aspect of this is, we're talking early PCs, we're talking sort of grid things, we're talking, this very super saturated color to it.
Yeah, and neon, definitely leaning on neon with purples or blues or greens, or pinks, yellows, or it's like the Phantasy Star 2 battle screen, which is just a grid in the background.
Yeah. But it is, it's something that exudes, that screams 80s without even, necessarily exploring the trappings of what that decade was. Which sort of takes us to what obviously is the instigating thing that got the Midnight going, which is a little 2011 film by Nicholas Winding Refn called Drive.
Drive is one of the most weirdly inspirational movies I've ever seen, because it kickstarted a whole lot of the 80s nostalgia, like this whole thing, like some of the the Tim McEwen, the producer of The Midnight, and one of the main band members, and was heavily inspired by this. And it's just like, it's after Drive that we saw all of this synthwave, we saw all of this 80s music that's not from the 80s, and it kind of came from this. I mean, there were people who were already there doing it, but this is when they became known.
Yeah, because I suppose you got to go back to, I would say in elements, sort of Daft Punk sort of lean into this. The Daft Punk's music always feels like almost like a mirror to particularly, obviously a lot of their sampling does come from sort of late 70s and early 80s records, but there's also like an aesthetic to Daft Punk that obviously does lean into that. And obviously you get a lot of French house, which sort of things like Kavinsky, who becomes a major figure in obviously who basically go, here is essentially an imaginary soundtrack to an 80s film that doesn't exist, with all the hallmarks of the Vangelis sort of style production, things like Tangerine Dream to an extent, sort of that sort of the peak 80s sort of sound of things like Phil Collins, yes of that era particularly, that very clean veneer of sort of these very gated drums of big electronic bass synthesizers, the sort of stuff, I mean, if we have one song from the 80s that sounds like it, I'd say it's something like Take My Breath Away. It's that sort of huge electronic sound coming out of the thing, and the very 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 synthetic landscape.
It's also curious that this is the time when Daft Punk became like more than people who were there, and then they kind of became gods of music. I mean, not that they weren't already. I mean, Discovery came out way before this, but it was here when 2013, when they released Random Access Memories, and it's the one that got the Grammys. And this was when oh yeah, Daft Punk, we love them. Oh, you love them too? Yeah, awesome.
Oh shit, guys!
It's when it all came together.
Yeah, and you go, holy shit, and everyone turns around and goes, holy shit, Giorgio Moroder is like the best guy ever. And Paul Williams, hey, remember Paul Williams? He's on this track, you know, when he's not, you know, wandering around Phantom of the Paradise and telling everyone it's Thursday. You know, hey, this is a really cool aesthetic, you know. This is, you know, something we could do. And sort of Drive took this and put it, pardon the pun, into overdrive.
Which is very weird, I want to say, just because I own the Drive soundtrack. There are 3 80s music, not from the 80s.
Tracks on it.
There's the Chromatic song, which you may count, you may not. But then the rest of it, it's a Cliff Martinez, very minimalist soundtrack and an opera song. So there's just like the 3 songs from artists I never really heard from again after the Drive soundtrack. They probably have a following. I hope they're doing just fine.
Yeah.
But then they just kicked off this huge wave of other people who are already there and maybe just below breaking through, or just, you know, and then kaboom. So,
it's not so much the artists that appeared on the Drive soundtrack that became famous. It's more things that were trying to produce I guess a sonic answer to what, you know, Winefinger Refn does in Drive. Is, I feel, more what synthwave became, and that sort of then further advanced by the game Hotline Miami, who very much does sort of, you know, take the sonic palette that was floating around with, you know, obviously, you know, around, you know, what Drive had created, and basically goes, here is a video game that is essentially all the violence of Drive and nothing else. By the way, nice to have a you know, a free game with this banging soundtrack as the joke.
Yeah, absolutely. I forget which one it was, but one of the artists turned out to be shit. But oh well.
Yeah.
Hotline. It's no surprise that I came into this and it's the new music is the old music I was used to, but people were utilizing it properly. I don't know how much people were thinking about it. I mean, of course, people like Wendy Carlos were thinking about it, but also synthesizers were used to a certain extent to minimalize costs and replace orchestras, which was when you had the orchestra soundtrack samples in the 80s and early 90s. They were terrible. You just I can't even listen to a History Channel thing from the 90s because it's all trying to replicate an orchestra with a synth, and it's all using terrible samples that don't sound right.
Yeah.
But this is all using it to make it an aesthetic of its own. So I'm still an old man listening to nostalgic stuff, but this is new nostalgia.
New nostalgia.
New nostalgia, yes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the Midnight was going for.
The other sort of key figure, I guess, in this medium is, and it's ironic that we obviously go about talking about keeping costs down for film soundtrack, is of course John Carpenter, who you know, particularly on the soundtracks where he does the, you know, the very, particularly on something like, you know, Escape from New York, which I almost say, you know, is proto synthwave, particularly that very synthesizer led main theme. You know, but it's you know,
the soundtrack was made to represent the future and not to replace anything, and that's the point. This is using it as self-aware that this is what it is, and it is trying to create a specific soundscape.
Yeah, in the same way that Vangelis very much, you know, this music, you know, 80s music as a whole did not sound like the 80s that synthwave wants you to feel it sounds like. These are usually, particularly on Vangelis's work on Blade Runner, and on obviously John Carpenter's work on Escape from New York, and a couple of other artists who were doing, you know, music for films in this period. It is designed to represent a future a future. Now, obviously, ironically, it becomes the sound through synthwave of the imagined 1980s from whence it was born.
what was actually popular was what Todd in the Shadows calls the farting synth, and there was just this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
like
you can hear it if you hear the cover of Funky Town from the 80s. I can't remember the band that does it, but
no, I can't
you'll definitely because they put the like the lead for the addictive Funky Town line on the farting synth.
Oh god.
So, and nowadays the only person who does that is Yoko Kanno when she's just having fun with whatever she's discovered that week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. Like, don't get me wrong. There is music that sounds like things like ultravox, things like I guess to a certain extent, sort of things the sort of the proto-industrial brands, so sort of stuff like towards the very end of the 80s, Skinny Puppy and obviously a nascent Nine Inch Nails. But this is not a typical sound. Synthesizers are still regarded as particularly for popular music. They you get bands who become known for using synthesizers, but it's always used as a texture. I mean, you take something for example like Ultravox's Vienna, which features obviously a very prominent synthesizer line. It is very much we cannot afford, or we cannot get the sort of the session musicians. There is a preset on our synthesizer that sounds like kind of what we want. It'll have to do. So,
yeah. All right. So we spent 15 minutes. We should probably get into the Midnight, the band, and the album that we're talking about today.
So yeah, the Midnight sort of form in California because of course they formed in California.
I can tell this because the Midnight was actually the first post-COVID band I went to.
There we go.
So it's made up of Atlanta-based singer Tyler Lyle and Los Angeles-based Danish-born producer, songwriter, and singer Tim McGowan.
Yep.
They're two very different people, but they met at a North Hollywood songwriting workshop. What they explained it as at the show is that they were trying to line up songwriters with producers, and with people who were talented, but they didn't have some kind of outlet or something to get them going on a project. And so they met each other, and they actually have very differing styles. If you listen to Tyler Lyle says he writes the songs and the lyrics, and then I can't remember how exact I put it as he gives it to Tim, who puts it into the computer. He's the one who handles the atmosphere and the synthesizers, and he's also the drummers, or he plays the drum pads.
Absolutely. So yeah, it does feel like there is it's so. Obviously, they then produced the album, the EP Days of Thunder, which again, 80s reference. Was that a 90s film, Days of Thunder?
Days of Thunder was a 90s film.
That was the Tom Cruise indie.
Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. It's actually surprisingly better than it sounds like as far as a Tom Cruise in a NASCAR film.
Oh God.
It's. But they wrote two singles from that: "We Move Forward" and "Gloria," that would be released on their EP "Days of Thunder," and then they started working, and they eventually came up with this LP. Their first, and I'd probably say defining LP, "Endless Summer," in 2016. So. We got this is pretty much the mission statement for the Midnight, or if nothing else, this is mostly what they are about.
Yes.
Or
this is their first of 4 albums. Currently, the most recent thing they've released is the third part of their trilogy of albums called Heroes, which they're currently touring for.
Yep, that's the tour I went to, the Midnight Heroes tour. So this is essentially an album about nostalgia. It is about, living it, thinking about life in your early 20s when things were a goddamn mess and things never worked out and everything's just crazy. But now you're looking back at it and, those were really awesome times. Your nostalgia kind of took out it remembers the bad things, but it doesn't have like the sharp cutting pain of it or like the consequences. It is the feeling of when you were young without the consequences and just sitting there and thinking back on it.
But it also does, I feel, it obviously this is a band who, owe their existence to cinema. This is, a very, it almost does feel like inadvertently or deliberately, this is like almost a soundtrack for a fictional, a narrative film about a narrative coming of age film. There's a lot of titles on this that sort of, indicate, characters or, a sensibility of, the end of this idea of an endless summer of, empty.
And they are aware of this too. Like many of their titles, like in this album, they have Crockett's Revenge, which Crockett is a character from Miami Vice, and their EP Nocturnal, which feels like it's supposed to be a soundtrack of a dark, brooding action movie about an anti-hero fighting the people the cops can't get or something like that. And there's one called Collateral, which is a Michael Mann film. It was made in the 2000s, but Michael Mann was obviously one of the
progenitors of 80s.
Progenitors of this aesthetic, especially when it comes to like the Grand Theft Auto side, because he is the reason Tangerine Dream is on Grand Theft Auto 5, because he did Tangerine Dream for Thief.
Yeah.
Which was at the time nominated as a Razzie for worst soundtrack, but once we get that, it's like, oh, this is actually really neat once you take it out of the time and everybody we want what's now, we want what's cool, and Tangerine Dream scoring this low-key James Caan movie is not what we want, but later people found it.
It's like, well, it's what we want now in 2023.
Yeah,
like, given Heat's just obviously had a written sequel, not in the last three or 4 months. James, Michael Mann is very hot property. But yeah, there's a sensibility. So I don't know if we want to do our normal track by track, because this is a very much a feeling as a record. It's the individual tracks sort of I guess form a coalescent whole. It's sort of over nearly half of this record is instrumental, and it's not instrumental in now. These are interludes between tracks, as in these are their own little sort of sonic palette, their own sort of little moment in this sort of in this narrative.
Yeah, it is a flow of feelings, and like once we get to the later songs, you kind of get like why the feeling faded and stuff like that, and it's harder to remember. It's harder to remember songs of the latter end than it is the opening, because I think they start with the heavy burst of emotions from thinking back way back when and how good it felt, and then it kind of draws down to why things didn't work out.
Yeah, which sort of basically, you got the title track, obviously Endless Summer, which starts with this very hopeful, very upbeat sort of thing, and you end up with Memories, which we'll obviously come on to, but almost feels like it's, you know, a coda to the feeling of the rest of this album, and takes, you know, a different sonic, you know, direction, a different sonic, you know, sensibility to a decade that is now, you know, nearly 40 years in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So, should we start at the beginning?
Yes. We'll start at the beginning at Endless Summer. Like, Endless Summer, of course, starts with
Endless Summer.
But also the first sound you hear is somebody putting a tape into a very meaty tape cassette, like a very 80s hard plastic, if not metal, tape deck that either cost you a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, depending on what end of the 80s you were on. And just slamming that in and slamming the play button, because if you don't want to play this thing, if you don't mean it, those things don't run. They'll like stop midway, and it's like, oh, sorry, I guess you didn't mean to play that, so you have to slam the play button or slam stop or eject.
Yeah. Which itself, you know, starts it with, you know, something, you know, me born 9 years later, you know, would not have had that sort of experience. You know, it's ironic that an album so integrated, so absolutely beholden to the 1980s, sort of starts I guess with a sound that a lot of the people coming to, you know, now, obviously, you know, off the back of things like Drive, you know, this is almost like a wink to the sort of people who were born in this, sort of going, you know what this is, don't you? Do you remember these buggers?
Especially the album cover. It has a neon, the Midnight in pink neon, and of course there's like the random girl posing in the background. Yeah. Like that would be in like the background of like a Lisa Frank's, or not maybe Lisa Frank, but like it would be in the background of a music video. Like if you've ever watched Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, when they do the music video, and there's just a random shirtless man posing in the middle of the music video, because that's what you do. That's the kind of image. I mean, and of course evoking a lost love or something like that too. Yeah,
and it's got that sort of, you know, that sort of, it's got an element of tape hiss, and you know, I think there's a couple of
tape hiss, and it's got a NES video game, Endless Summer, as the title, with like the little arrow.
Yeah,
and copyright 1984.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no. So it's you know, the album cover very much goes, this is the experience you are going to have. This is a, you know, something harking back to a different age, you know, with our Miami Vice City sort of, you know, pink, you know, neon pink writing across the cover. I mean, I think that may even be the same font as the Vice City logo. Anyway, so we start with the click of a tape. We start with,
and then there's the chorus, which is the light voice. I call it the voice of nostalgia, or it's just maybe the voice in the back of your head, and it's like, should have known at the end of summer the innocence fades and the weak becomes stronger. Should have known at the end of the summer I'd be lost without you. And it's just like that feeling when you're by yourself and thinking about things in the past, and then they just get into Tyler Lyle describing you know, the images and like the vision of nostalgia. Like my favorite lyric for the first verse is "Summer airbrush fever dreams," because like we airbrush the hell out of summer nostalgia, because it gets hot, especially in places like Lyle hangs out, like in California or, you know, Atlanta, or like you don't remember how much the heat bared down on you, so like it sort of becomes this fever dream of nostalgia that airbrushes the experience, so you don't forget, oh yeah, we were sweating and I had to take a 20-minute shower and I felt like crap for the next 2 days after that trip.
Absolutely, but I also think it does sort of go, you know, I guess, you know, this is the thing with synthwave. Synthwave does airbrush out, you know, all the unpleasantness of the 80s as a decade, you know, you know, rampant Reaganism, and, you know, the threat of being, you know, nuked to absolute shit by the Russians, and, you know, the basically everything bad, you know, about the 80s, you know, and replaces it with, you know, a nostalgic, halcyon sort of, you know, rose-tinted view of the decade, I think.
And kind of where we embraced Asian culture instead of, like, made them the villains or the people who were taking over.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, remember when they tried
that doesn't come into play as much here as it does in other EPs and albums, but...
No. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not going to get started on, you know, how city popper genre in the 80s has become, you know, beloved of the internet, you know, where 30 years ago we're like, we sure we want them near our music, etc., etc. Yeah. yeah, we remember what happened when we tried to buy the Sounders.
Yeah.
Or the mod. Yeah, we remember. But anyway, I feel this gets the album off to a very good start. It sort of, you know, it lays down instantly, this is what the Midnight are. This is the sort of sonic environment they're going to, you know, inhabit. You know, this doesn't sound, you know, this at once sounds like an 80s song, and sort of looking back on the 80s and using, you know, oh, you know, my childhood of the 80s, I am going to use the sound of the 80s to evoke that.
Yeah, and just adolescence and growing up, and this album is mainly squared right in, I want to say the very end of the adolescence, early 20s. I know most people don't consider early 20s adolescence, but it still kind of is, because most people are put in the world with knowing idea what the hell they're doing. It's like the What's My Name Again lyric, nobody loves you when you're 23.
23, yeah.
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 But, oh, what's my age again? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, is essentially the same sort of sonic idea, but, you know, this is, you know, what children of the 90s I guess manifested that as, you know, such, so to speak, or people, you know, growing up in that period. Yeah, I really like this track. I have listened to this track multiple times, divorced for the rest of the album. It's really fucking good.
Yeah.
This is a very strong start to the record.
Very strong, and it gets even stronger because we get into Sunset, which was actually my introduction into the Midnight. It was very... I can explain it like this. I listen to a lot of soundtrack filler stuff on YouTube when I'm just like overnight and everything's too quiet. So I was listening to John Parr, the St. Elmo's Fire guy, and he did a song for Running Man, Restless Heart. And at the end of the video they have on YouTube, they put this track onto just like as an ender to, here's the other music we have, and here's our production company link to this. And so they put Sunset on there, and I'm like, wow, this is an amazing song. What does it come from? So I Shazammed it, and okay, I'll check out this Midnight. And then I come to this album, and then I hit play on the album, and then of course Endless Summer comes on, and it's like, oh shit, I have found something. And then I listen to Sunset, and I'm like, yep, they're my new thing. They're officially my new thing. Because I don't know how better to explain Sunset than it is a perfect song. Not like, you can find flaws or you can find whatever, and I'm sure Tim will like say, oh god, they were mastering this was such a pain in the ass, and there's things I hear that I never want to hear again, because it's your first LP, and that's every like producer or somebody who works on it, what they'll say. But like everything in it enhances the song, and there's nothing where it feels like there's a dead moment. There's nothing that feels like this was unnecessary. Every part from when they count down into the chorus, like 3, 2, 1, or like when they choose to put in more instrumental into the verse, or when they choose to repeat the chorus but they have it echoing like it's going away. Like every part of this song is like incredible and perfect and enhances it.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful, amazing song, and I can't do it justice other than listening to it.
Yeah. I mean, this was the first single the group produced, and this was like teased for like months before, and yeah, I am not surprised why. It's the best thing. It's arguably the joint best track on the album. It captures that sort of, that same sort of, you are a kid from a nowhere town. You want to go to the big city, you want to be somebody, you want to go somewhere, you want to do something. That same sort of, sensibility that Springsteen has basically run with for the best part of half a century. But, there is a quality to this song. It is that, it is adolescent yearning personified, and yeah, I cannot blame you for listening to this track and instantly wanting to hear more.
And pretty much the Midnight agree, because this is the song they play at the end of their encore. This is the one you've been waiting for.
Yeah.
And we are going to play this to like a crescendo of people screaming and applause, and they're like going to go away from this and like, yeah, that show was fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And the song is basically about that, and wanting to run away with your girl, and knowing things are probably going to be doomed, but this is our emotion. We are taking it. We are running
somewhere with.
Like, but like with the concerns that they have the pre-chorus lyric. They say it's darkest before the dawn, but we're moving on. We're moving on. We're moving on. Fuck yeah, let's get out of here. We're burning our old identity, literally.
Get out of it.
And getting out of here.
Cool. So the next track is Daytona, which is an instrumental.
It's an instrumental meant to, like, get it put in mind that outrun 80s video game driving music. I mean, I don't think it specifically hits Outrun, because Outrun's more Japanese city pop, kind of lighter. This is intense racing, like, all of those, like, bit chip,
Yeah, I know the ones. Yeah. That's sort of very, we go, sort of
F1 racing, or just racing in general. Boom, boom. We go around the track way faster, and the race is overweight earlier than like it would be an actual race that's like 500 miles.
Yeah, it's like very arcade.
It's fun.
Sort of, yeah, it's good. The next track is about Jason Voorhees, and it's called Jason. It also features Nikki Flores, who is... What is Nikki Flores from? Let me quickly find out.
She is a constant collaborator, and it feels like there are only two official band members of the Midnight, Lyre and McKellen, but Nikki Flores, when they're on tour, and they're kind of the unofficial third band member, along with their sax player and their guitar player.
I do love the amount of sax on this. Like, there is a lot of sax going.
This is absolutely, if you love sax solos, you are going to find your songs in this album.
Yeah. Apparently she collaborated with, what was it? Nas, apparently, somewhere. Yeah. Nas, yes, on Nas's Life is Good. Good for her.
And Frank Ocean, and
yeah, not just underground, but in a lot of electronic music. Good for her. Good.
Yes, absolutely. She's very talented. And, you can see, and I can see why she collaborates with them a lot, because she brings this, like, this is my reality to these people. Like if you ever.
Yeah, there's a sense a little bit. There's a sense a little bit.
The 80s version of somebody that I used to know.
Yeah,
where she brings in her perspective on why this didn't work, but I will remember it fondly. And it's not just Lyle's.
Yeah, and I feel like you do. The thing I will say about synthwave, the synthwave, from my knowledge of it, a lot of it is a very masculine dominated genre. It is this is the band that the two guys, the guys from like flipping, what is it, Ninja Sex Party, who are basically huge, let's players. This is a very blokey genre in like a different way from like something like hard rock would be. It's slightly nerdy guys in their bedrooms with computers, and to bring a female voice into this thing to sort of provide this different perspective is, I think, one of the Midnight's really strong points as a group. It's not just nerdy bedroom pop. It is there's a little bit more of a three-dimensionality to this.
Mm-hmm. There is a human emotion to it, which Lyle brings in. When he's not doing the Midnight, his music is folk-inspired. I did send you a couple of demos and early versions where before it went through the synthetic processing and mastering and all of that, and it became what it is. And they sound like folk songs. It is just a guy on a guitar being very wistful, and Lyle has incredible vocals.
Oh yeah, he's
incredibly I don't want to call it falsetto, but he has a very light voice, light male voice that is extremely hard to get right. It is one of those voices where if it's not over 95% great, it is terrible. And he is just great all the time, and it's just like, and you can see him like on stage working it. This is no offense, Mr. Lyle, if you ever hear this, and he would never want me to call him Mr. Lyle, but Tyler, if you ever hear this, this is not an insult. It's just he kind of looks like Popeye when he's like processing the lyrics or processing the singing and getting the voice right.
I've seen some of the live stuff, and
that is understandable, because that is an insanely incredibly difficult voice to get consistent and do for an entire night's concert and do that night after night. So it's just like it is meant to emphasize how much damn work that voice is.
Oh yeah, holy shit. I mean, they are, and the live video I have seen of these guys is just incredible. I mean, I think you linked me to tour dates. I think it was on like some day I can't do or something, which is annoying, but they'll be back round. This is the sort of band who tour hard and really do stuff for the fans.
Yeah, a lot of their tours in Europe are sold out, so they'll be back around, and hopefully they'll be back around Kansas. Everybody seemed to love Kansas City when they came down to it. Even the Nashville lead first front. What is? I forgot what the first band that plays that is called. I am sorry, I lost words, but they were like, oh wow, this is different. This is they are already enthusiastic for us.
The
support band, and they've never come.
Always arrive and watch.
I have a feeling they'll be back, and I'll get to see them again. So unlike the Proto Men, who had don't know if the Proto Men, who are another band, we'll get into another day. Yeah, but
sooner than you
think. Their Midwestern tour, I just hear crappy things about. I tried to see them in Lincoln, Nebraska, but they were booked at a place that didn't even exist anymore, and that just, I don't know if the Midwest I mean, they had people like the people from Lincoln who drove right over to Des Moines, so they had a following. But like when they got to Kansas City in the midnight, like it was a full house. Like you saved your spot 4 hours in advance. My feet were killing me after that. So I have no reason to think they will not be welcome on their touring.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. I mean, they've done. From what I can see, they've done a couple of tours in the UK. I mean, like, if a band is making it out in these heightened days, if a band is making it out here, you know, you've got a following here, and you know you've got a following here.
Yeah. So back to Jason. I don't think it's specifically about Jason Voorhees. No, it feels like it's a song about a boy who is just going for whatever. I mean, he's probably just late 18s, early 20s, but he still gets called a boy by Nikki Flores. Or at least that's the feeling it gets, because he's just chasing after whatever thrill there's and whatever person's in that he's on, but he's not for anything permanent. And then that's when it goes to the Nikki Flores bit where it's like, tell me, what are you after? Because the night will never get you what you want. And that I'm going to run away from you because
you're creepy.
You are just, you're creepy and you're after just whatever thrill tonight brings. And that's not what I want. I hope you find what you're looking for. Goodbye.
Yeah. Which is sort of a vibe continued on the next track, which is Synthetic, which is like a lot of this song and the rest of this album is that sort of very upbeat 80s, very synthy bassy sort of thing. This is a ballad. So it's on your album for a ballad.
And I guess it's a welcome change, and it's a welcome change of flow, because you I have a serious problems with songs that are all the same thing on an album.
Yeah, we've had this in the past, haven't we, Joe? It's like
it's the problem with my problem with rap albums is not the music themselves. Like, they have great songs. It's just like every song is "We are the fucking best. Don't fuck with us or we'll kill you" albums.
Yeah.
So when the song is 80% that, it's like I got the idea you were throwing down many times, but
it also blends into one large throwdown, which very good.
And then my mind just wanders, and then I don't remember what I've just listened to, and that. But this is a song about
being a robot.
Like trying to figure out how to move on, and it's got some, emotions about, like if I were to put this into a song you could compare it to, it's also like Yoko Kanno's "Be Human," even though it's not, they are very different songs, but it's about feeling really sad that you're not finding the big emotion, or you're not feeling like you're a person.
Yeah, I mean,
and the other track
the other track I was going to compare this to, ironically, is "Instant Crush" off "Random Access Memories" by Daft Punk, which is sort of, that's a similar vibe, except obviously here we don't have Julian Casablancas of the Strokes sort of to be a robot boy. That was a very strange music video.
And if you want to go, like, this song could mean anything to anybody. Like, they intentionally mean to make it general, and so you can fit your experience and your nostalgia into it. And that's sometimes their mission statement. And that kind of feels like this. And you can make it about something else, or you can make it about the band trying to make new songs that work, because it's like trying to turn the old into something new. I mean, obviously that's not what the rest of the context of the song intended, but it's just like trying to make something that feels within this aesthetic, at least.
Sure.
I'm probably just reaching. I'm probably talking out of my ass here. As
I mean, English music is for interpretation. Yeah. No, I mean, it's certainly, I feel the album needed something at this point, because otherwise it's just boom, 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 that sort of very very front heavy 80s sort of the synthesizer sound.
And it's the happy nostalgia. It's just like it doesn't get into why these things didn't work. And I feel like songs like Jason and Synthetic enhance it because there was this other part that you didn't that you've forgotten how you feel because either your body or your brain wants you to let it go because it hurts you. And then it comes back why this didn't work or why why you don't have that life or you were not comfortable. So
oh yeah, for sure. It very much does feel like, the again, this the thing with synth pop. A lot of it is, artifice and etc. and being very, very, oh look, upbeat balloon, synthesizers, and oh aren't we cool, and that sort of, the sort of I guess the sort of the Kenny Loggins sort of vibe, because that's the other sort of thing that seems like a big, which again is music for films, the famous Top Gun Danger Zone soundtrack, and like a lot of that 80s synth pop does sort of feel like it does sort of fall into, this is just montage music for a 80s movie that never existed. Whereas I feel the Midnight does sort of explore what it meant to be young in the 80s with a little bit more delicacy and a little bit more certainly a little bit more verite to it.
It gives you deeper, more defined feelings to latch on to the atmosphere. And I feel that's the greatest quality of the Midnight.
And indeed, they then sort of, go back towards the opposite, the sort of, the 80s sort of upbeat thing with the next track, which is almost instrumental, which is called The Equalizer.
It's... I mean, as the kids would say, it's a vibe.
It's a vibe.
And it's just... it's a vibe. It's a feeling that, you're by yourself, but somebody's trying to tell you you're not alone, or there's just that voice in the background, and it's just like, I don't know. What I get from this is looking at an apartment in a skyscraper and like seeing everything around you, and you're alone, but you're not alone, and it's just like, I don't know. So maybe that's the instrumental for later, but this all gives the feeling of this neon city and the people that live in it, and that's what a lot of the earliest Midnight songs resemble, especially when you get to their next release, the EP Nocturnal, which is Night in the City. That is the entire mission statement of that album.
Oh, for sure, yeah, absolutely. And this does have that sort of sense of it's a sort of a sense of this is the sort of almost twilight, I guess. This is the sort of the evening of the endless summer. This is the long hot summers where everything's sort of still sticking to you, and it's unpleasant and you're hot, and you're sort of you're sort of thinking back on the day that sort of you've had, I guess.
Or it's you've had an endless day and now you have an endless night. Or that's how it feels, because like people will say the sky is higher in autumn or something like that, where everything is clear and just everything's stuffed up. You are trapped in this night, and there's just darkness that envelops you, and sometimes you see the stars, but most of the night you don't.
It's just too damn hot. The next track is again sort of, I guess, capturing that sort of, again, this is the closest I think the Midnight does get to the sort of 80s action movie sort of montage music. But even that sort of got a tinge of, melancholia and...
Yeah. I think this one is about the resilience of youth. How... when you've gone through all of this, you still bounce back because you still have energy and you still have hope and you still have the feeling. And like, I think this was a good spot to play it because you put some of the like why this didn't work, why stuff is failing, and what's going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have why you keep coming back again and again when you're a kid, because you have all of that energy you have for this. You have resiliency, and God damn it, you're the comeback kid, and you're gonna. This time it's gonna be right.
Yeah. It's that sort of the sensibility.
I've learned now, even though you haven't learned, but
yeah. Oh no, there is very much that sensibility to it of that. Yeah. But no,
I wish I had more to say. I mean, it's a very good song, but it's very clear about itself.
It is very much the closest the Midnight does get to the sort of, I guess, the more typical sound of synthwave, which is basically, as I said, 80s montage music on steroids. Which not that that's a bad thing. That's very much a niche that synthwave has sort of cut itself in the years since the genre came of age. It's really big synthesized. There is a big emotional sort of sensibility to it.
And what was I going to say? But like a lot of it is more pop synth, and this is flirting or going straight into the dark synthetic without letting it overwhelm or define the emotion, which is sometimes what it does.
Yeah, and certainly it follows
like
that
like a Depeche Mode song,
it very much
like I feel like Depeche Mode. Sorry about that.
No. You were saying.
Okay. All right, so I'll just get my thought out because my brain won't let it go without letting the thought out. But it's like how Depeche Mode, how their music will define the song a lot more than the lyrics were. And this one, it's kind of the opposite. Like it's the sound is supporting the lyrics put in the song instead of defining it.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and it's there's a thing with synth pop, with this synthwave stuff, where the lyrics are they're not really that important. They're basically another level of artifice to what we get from this. But here the lyrics, there is consideration to it, to what these songs are saying, not just in their sonic palette but in their lyrics, and there's these vignettes that the album sort of does go into on almost every as you said, it has got a very cinematic eye, when in terms of the lyrics with this.
Yeah, and Tim will also use that in a visualizer. He will put up, like in their official videos, he will put a visualizer of kind of what the mood he wants to evoke on the official music video. I mean, not music video because they're not really videos, but they're just kind of, there's the song and here's what we have in the background, and this is, and it will have, it's a lot of neon flashing lights and that kind of thing, or like a grid chasing after you for horror show, but we'll get into that. But he has a vision for what visually he wants to evoke in this, as well as in the soundscape, and he experiments with that on like the YouTube videos that they put up.
Yeah, and this is a genre of music you cannot get away from the fact this is intended to have a visual aspect. This is essentially a redefinition, reimagining of film soundtracks. This is a genre influenced by essentially a single film and a single video game, which obviously massively tinges this music does feels like it has to have this visual aspect to an extent to push back against, because otherwise it is just it does feel like in places like a soundtrack without a film.
And yeah, also kind of like the again, we're going to get into the Proto-Men, and they have a cover album called The Cover Up, which is an entire album of covers that's meant to be the soundtrack to a movie that doesn't exist. So if you're a Proto-Men fan and you liked that, The Cover Up, this is more music for you too.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like the followings, and I guess to an extent, what each band is trying to do with the Proto-Men and with the Midnight is not that dissimilar in a way. They are both these retro sort of sensibilities reimagined for a new age.
And I also feel they are trying to put an importance around it. Like they are, like the Proto-Men are creating a rock opera out of Mega Man, which was, the game all the kids played and didn't think much of the story, and even after you watch the story once and then you never watch the opening again, and that's how you took Mega Man, because it's the same story every time. But it makes it into this incredibly important rock opera, and people are just like have been waiting for years for Act 3, and it's just like, I want to know what happens next in this wonderful like story.
Reimagining, it's almost like an 80s. It's almost like the Proto-Men are almost like a rock opera, like somebody had gone circa 1980, I don't know, so circa 1980, 84, 85, someone like John Hughes has essentially done a near future film in which a scientist, basically a scientist falls out of friendship with another scientist, sees that other scientist essentially become a totalitarian maniac and create a robot boy to battle him, and John Hughes made this in 1985, and then a few years later Capcom went, oh, we'd like the game rights of this, but we're not willing to pay John Hughes XYZ amount of money, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a game called Mega Man, which sort of has the same plot points. And then the Proto-Men came along to find the original John Hughes film, which had been lost, and make a rock opera based on it. I feel is the vibe they are trying to create.
I don't know if John Hughes would be the right director for that. It feels like when they first came up with the PG-13, and they had stuff that was confused. They wanted for kids, but they were confused and made it darker.
Joe Dante then?
One of the terrible examples is like Masters of the Universe.
Oh god.
But it's like that, but what if we made it one of the greatest operas of all time?
Yeah. rock operas. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
rock operas.
We'll come to the Proto-Men, but before too long, I feel.
Yeah. But with the Midnight, I feel like they are putting real emotion in and like into this aesthetic. And since you can feel it, you can put your own feelings into that and plug it into this genre. And that's what caused the bigger sweeps instead of the Proto-Men, which is making an emotional rock opera. And just these sweeping points like, you don't want a hero, you just want another statue to face. And just saying it at the top of your voice. This is like more subtle and it's more personal.
Yeah, absolutely. The back three tracks on the back 3 or 4 tracks on the album, which are Vampires, Crockett's Crusade, Nighthawks, and Lonely City, almost start to take things in a different direction, I feel. Because it almost like vampires is, you know, all very dark synthwave. You know, we're getting towards, you know, the proper sort of gothic Depeche Mode sort of stuff. You know, and Nighthawks is, again, it's this beautiful vignette of you know, it has this brilliant line. Sometimes, you know, do I ever cross your mind through the windows in the sky when you forget to close the blind? You know, this voyeuristic, you know, 80s sort of sense where everyone's sort of, you know, detached. You know, the sort of the same sort of, you know, paranoid 80s that created things like, you know, American Psycho, etc., where it's sort of, you know, there's an increasing twitchiness, there's increasing, you know, night is not, you know, we're not sort of, you know, a glow on the thing, we are now into full night, and, you know,
yeah, probably cocaine was involved, but it's also you need people, but then, like, the point of vampires is you need people, but also you go feeling alone because you use everybody up, hence the vampires, and then just leave them, and then everybody comes home after all of this outings to be with people, and they are alone, and that's kind of what that stuff. And they say we come to nothing, and to nothing will return, and in between is gravity and bridges left to burn.
Yeah, and Nighthawks again, which obviously, you know, there's obviously the average, you know, the Edward Hopper allusion there, obviously to the famous painting, but, you know, the sensibility of, you know, watching you know, another life of somebody you don't know, but you sort of see, you know, through the blinds sometimes. You sort of see them, you know, going about their other life, you know. There's, you know, an increasing sense in the back half of the album, particularly these last 4 tracks, of, you know, the distance, you know, the distance, you know, oh, you've got to the big city, but the big city is cold and remote, and, you know, an alien, I guess, is the sort of, you know,
It presses down. You want to make these connections, but it presses down on you so hard that you can't make that connection, which is this is a weird analogy, but it's like when you're in a class of 200 people and you're far less likely to ask a question because the pressure of, like, being in front of these people and saying that you don't know something is much harder than when you're in a class of 20 people. And when you're in a city, you're surrounded by people, but you know no one because everything presses on you so much that you don't want to, or it takes all of your energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, you know, gone is, you know, the halcyon sort of thing. You know, you are, the remoteness of you know, and I feel that remoteness sort of comes full circle on the end track, which, you know, if Endless Summer is, you know, the glow of summer just sort of disappearing slowly as, you know, as you roll into September and you go back to school, or you go back to college, you know, memory is very much this, you know, held at arm's length, and yeah. You know, a sense of, you know,
it's thinking about taking it all in and absorbing everything, and accepting it, but accepting it why it ended too. And there were good things, but there are reasons why it didn't work, and that's what Memories is. And it's a wonderful way to end the album. It's a great song, and, you know, it kind of wraps the album in a nice bow for like people like me to discuss about it, because this album has this flow that we're going through, and we can discuss it, and it has this resonance. So, which is why it's kind of, I don't want to say the iconic album for the Midnights, but it is their definitive album, and is the one I think will
last. Ironically, particularly ironically for an album looking back into, you know, a I guess a sugar coated, but a sugar coated increasingly obviously towards the back end of the album, a less sugar coated, but vision of what the 1980s and what the childhood of the band was like. I really like this record. I previously hadn't heard of this band before. You introduced them to me. I have listened to now everything they have done. I really like this band. I'm intrigued. This is a band I'm really interested to see where they go next. Now that synthwave has now approaching a decade old, and a lot of its key releases are we are starting people starting to get nostalgic about a genre that is itself nostalgic.
Yes. I love. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. I will listen to it for decades and decades.
Thank you for introducing it.
And I've also picked through, and I've introduced it to other people. It's like people don't listen to me, but when they do, they're like, "Yeah, I should have listened to you more." And then I don't know why I don't listen to you more, huh?
Yeah.
But anyway, you want, I've gone through their discography as well. So if you like they're doing a gritty 80s cop movie soundtrack, and it's just one anti-hero in the night searching for a serial killer. Nocturnal is your album. I mean, it's an EP, but it's long enough to be an 80s album. So there is that, and it's extremely good. It has that feel to it, and it has that dark, gritty, midnight in the city texture. That's excellent. They did do an EP called Horror Show. That's Halloween. There is a great song called Neon Medusa that definitely riffs on Thriller. You will definitely understand the similarities, but they make it different enough, and it has really good lyrics. And Good and Red. If look up Good and Red, the live version, because sometimes, this band is great live, and you will understand why their songs are the way, because when they're in the studio, sometimes it gets too controlled. Like Good and Red is a song that is not about being in control unless it's you being in control of everyone else and everything else, because Good and Red is about breaking out of your boundaries and breaking out of all of the demons or things that make you, and just destroying them. It's a song you don't want to sing out loud because people will get the wrong idea, but it is incredible live.
For sure.
And it's incredible when everybody breaks out. Also, I understand Heroes, the album, more live because it is anthemic. It is about stuff you are playing live in front of thousands of people. And there are some stuff of substance in it. They have a song that's a tribute to firefighters who died in California wildfires, which was really good. But they also but most of their big songs are just getting a big emotion and shouting it in front of a crowd, and that is how they worked. Even if it's not my favorite of theirs if I'm just listening to the album, but I get it when I heard it live. And also Monsters, I have mixed opinions about, because it's I feel like it was trying to get a more mainstream audience. They explain it differently, it's the monsters we had as children, or early adults, or something like that, how they describe it. But it feels like they are poking at a general audience and trying to see who bites. They'll have trap voice, and there are songs that are more that feel more like they're about high school kids. But Monsters has their second perfect song, which is Brooklyn. It is a wistful song about living in Brooklyn, and you're not exactly sure if you're going to make it, but you're going to try because you love this person and she hates this city. But it is an incredible, wonderful song. And like I said, everything in it enhances. Like they start with like being in the cold and just the sound of you feeling your own breath in the air, and it's an incredible song in the exact opposite way of that Sunset is. Sunset is a song about fuck it, we're leaving, we're going. Who gives a shit? This is just about looking up at the city in a cold night and thinking about where you are and how you're gonna make it and all of that stuff. So yeah, if you definitely give Brooklyn a listen, it's on wherever you can listen to a song. So
yeah, absolutely.
Those are my recommendations.
I just listen to all of it, mate. It's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. They make it pretty easy to listen to all of it. They get that not everybody's got money, but they seem to be doing all right for themselves, and they just want people. They just want to reach people.
You can watch this on tape if you want. You can listen to they are. I think every album they release is on tape, which is just glorious.
And of course record and CD. I have CDs because I don't understand going backwards and listening to things that are less convenient. But I get it, record snobs. I get it. It has a warmer sound, but I don't have so much space, and I just want to be able to pull up the song and listen to it, and not have to guess on the record.
Anyway, that was Midnight. I really enjoyed this album, and if they come and tour the UK, I will have to go and see them. Okay,
so my album, and now you have an album next to choose?
Yes, I do. Joe, we are going back to 2004. Yes. Do you remember 2004?
Yeah, it was the worst year of my life, but I remember it, yeah.
We're going to talk about a little band from Jersey, Joe. New Jersey.
Okay.
We're going to talk about My Chemical Romance's 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge.
Okay. And we're going to get by confusion of being an old man who can't tell these bands apart. And all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, and me going, this is one of my favorite albums of all time.
This is now you get to do, this is my childhood, and I will kill you if you don't love it. No, we're not going to do that. We're not those people.
We're not those people, but yeah, we'll be talking about 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance. I believe it's also my time to choose an anime episode.
Yes.
Yes.
You had a choice, we're changing it.
I'm changing it again. Because I'm horribly flippant. We're going to be talking about, because, hey, I thought, why the fuck not? And because we've been watching, fairly normal stuff up until now, we're going to talk about My Next Life as a Villainess, All Roads Lead to Doom. Which is a series about which is probably our first and potentially our last ever excursion into the world of isekai with something that's actually good. Yeah. This should be a good episode because I can then jump up and down in an excitable way about my love of shoujo visual novels. We can be found,
which is fair enough.
Yep, we could be found online if you wish to, commission an episode. Because hey, on our Patreon, if you are a $5 subscriber, you can inflict within reason anything you want on us. within reason. That is patreon.com.
Okay, go ahead and do the website.
That is patreon.com/The Thom and Joe Show. Thom is spelled with a H. And on Twitter, we can be found at Not So Final Prod.
Yes, and if this is your first time listening, we mainly do anime and music. We can diverge into other things if need be, but we kind of switch between the two so we don't get burned out on one. Because I have been a seasonal reviewer, and I've been once you get reviewing one thing for a long time, and I've been a film critic, it's you get tired. Yeah. So we do this just to keep the show fresh and keep us interested.
Yeah, and obviously when we say you can inflict anything on us, we're not watching all 300 episodes of Dragon Ball. We don't have time. You don't have time to sit here for 8 hours talking about Dragon Ball, and you'd have to pay us a lot more than £5 a time, mate. So we will be back shortly with not only obviously those 2 episodes, but obviously more anniversary episodes. And obviously our big project in December. So yeah, if you're just tuning in for the first time, we do a lot of stuff. Hi.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, until next time.
Farewell.
Until next time, I've been Tom.
Yep. I've been Joe, and man, summer was a long time ago.
Yeah.
We had such memories.
Till next time.
But it's gone now. It's gone.
It's gone. For about 3 months. Maybe 4.
Okay, I think we're done.